a start anyway, because we do have a lot to get through, and judging from the earlier one, it's very lively. So, okay, so we are on. Just, do you want to put the question up? How do we prevent incorrect design, selection, and installation of fire safety products? Now, we've got a number of answers from people already. I think there's like 25 down there. We're not going to get through all of those, but we don't need to, because I have a grid of the top 3 from a number of people who are in this meeting. So we're going to go through the most popular ones. Now, some of them kind of wrap into another, so that makes the job rather easier. George, do you want to just put this into some sort of context?
Yeah. So what we're trying to do here is address the conundrum that we've come across a lot, and that is that we might have the right product. The product might be perfect, but it's then put in the wrong context, or it's fitted in the wrong wall, or whatever. So therefore, that product selection is really important. And I think under the new gateways, we've got the opportunity to, from a legal perspective, from a contractual perspective, to get that right. Because certainly on some of the key things like dampers and things like that, which can be the source of problems, my understanding is that those have got to be selected prescriptively before you move into construction. So, in other words, that by Gateway 2, you've got to have picked the products you're actually going to install, and not simply swap them out during a value engineering exercise. Now, that's a massive change for the industry, but it's one that certainly in our experience of these meetings, it's been welcomed to a great extent, because it is the source of a lot of problems. So I've got an example that we can perhaps show in when we get underway, Richard, that Paul McSorley has given as an example.
Excellent. Yeah, that'll be good. Let's have a little chat about first, and then that'll be very good to see. Okay, so the question, I'm going to have a look at my grid now. Let me just explain what we're actually doing in terms of the process here. We've had a lot of input from people, a lot of notes from people on these answers already. Now, I've not had the time to collate that and include that in these answers. Ron Burns has made a number of comments on the actual answers themselves, all of which actually I agree with. But that will come later once I get down to putting it all together. Sorry?
I think Ron, could you mute, Ron?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Carry on, Richard.
Right.
Yeah.
So that will all be taken care of. No, excuse me. Do use the chat. We record these meetings and to do high point notes, which you'll get a copy of. So nothing will be missed. So if you're a bit too shy to talk or something, don't worry, because we'll pick on you anyway. But failing that, put it in the chat. Okay, so the most popular in terms of which people think is the most important is number 4. Oh, that's interesting. A regulator should prevent companies from using uncertified products by providing clear guidelines on compatible options.
How can the regulator do that?
I have no idea. It's a weird one, isn't it? But this is that. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to ask Ron how the regulator is going to do that. But since you put it as one of your priorities, Ron.
Okay. As I said before, I'm new to this country, but
sure.
Sure, no worries.
From where I come from, the certificates that are used to prove a product is certified is very weak. So it's a one-page item. It's not. It doesn't contain complete information, and you never get to see the supporting document which underpins the ventilator. For example, if we've got a ventilator, it's very difficult to get 67%, 70% efficiency all the time. But some vents achieve that. But when they open, the blades sit inside the airstream, the ambient airstream, which means that they can't function properly because the wind will change the aerodynamic free area. So I think that the regulator should make sure that the information that goes out into industry on the certificates are more detailed than a one-pager, which is then underpinned by a salesman's schedule of areas. And that's just using the vent as an example.
Okay.
There is more detailed information available, though, isn't there? You know, through the test evidence and all that sort of stuff.
So the difficulties we have is that is deemed proprietary information, and it's very difficult to get that information from a manufacturer.
Yes,
whereas
I agree.
if there was take a ventilator, and if you want to put burglar guards on that ventilator, okay, that affects the geometric area doesn't change, but the aerodynamic area changes because you've put a restriction above the discharge of the vent. Further to that, if you have a grain store that you're protecting and you have burglar guards for people and bird mesh for birds, because birds can fly through burglar guards, you can lose 19% on the efficiency of the vent using those two products. But not all the vents are tested with those components in. So how do we accurately determine what's the correct aerodynamic area of that vent dependent on what's put on it?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that is that that's probably made up of potentially made up of several different manufacturers who have each got their own tested products, and it's then brought together into a fabricated solution, who you might also say is a manufacturer. I don't know if that's a good example, Ron, but we've sorry, I don't know whether I'm saying something to your example, but certainly as far as doors are concerned, as I understand it, you've got you know, a door set can be made up from the products that several manufacturers are producing and have tested, and then the door set itself can be tested, but then that isn't what sometimes gets supplied, because the information, it then goes through to a fabricator, and the fabricator will put together a door set of a number of different tested components, hopefully.
So I would then say that that product that gets sold, that's put together by various tested components, does not comply with the regulation. Because if we went to Mercedes-Benz now and we bought all the components for a Mercedes-Benz and we built it in my garage on the weekend, would I have a Mercedes when I'm finished? The answer is no, because there's other requirements that take place. So I just want to stick on the vent because I understand the vent and not the fire door.
Yep.
Once I can go as a vent manufacturer and I can source different components, build a vent, and then the vent gets tested. I can't go and then buy those parts that are all individually tested and build a vent that's not tested as a complete component. So when you buy a certified product, it's tested from start to finish. It's not just a whole lot of certified products put together to make it complete.
I accept that.
Let me bring John Field in.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yep. Excellent, thank you. I mean, I've just moved into this area with regards to specifically fire doors, and I would suggest we look at things holistically. It's not just that the items that we're sticking together have been tested individually, it's that they've been tested together so they are appropriate and they work together. So you have a selection of materials you could use, but they are tested together at some point to certify that they're all okay to fit together like a piece of puzzle. It's not just getting random stuff off a shelf that is acceptable and then putting them together in the hope that it'll be compliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ron's, you're exactly on the same page as Ron there. Paul, don't speak with your mouth full though, Paul, please.
I'll try not to. It's a good point, but the majority. I was going to ask Ron, what type of vent was he talking about? An AOV vent for a smoke control system, or was he talking about a louver that just essentially lets air in and out? Because they have different functions. But the aerodynamic free area of a smoke vent, as a for instance, and also the free area of a damper is quite important, certainly in natural systems. And then, of course, the other point about adding those things is you also have the issues with Part L, potentially of the building regs in terms of energy, because if you haven't designed it with it in there and you add it in there, you've added pressure drop. You might need to change your fan, you're changing all your characteristics. So it was really just to try and get to what sort of vent. But you're absolutely right. If you're buying an AOV, I'd say most AOVs for smoke vent probably don't have bird mesh on, because they probably wouldn't be open unless there was an incident or they were being tested. But if there was some reason why they were open a lot, I'm not sure what that would be, then they would need burglar mesh or even insect mesh, which would be even worse. And that certainly would change the manufacturer, if they're planning to have it used with that, then they should test it with that and give you a comparison.
Excellent. Cliff.
Hello. Just wanted to mention about LABC, the local authority building control, have details that are registered, and these are different components that are brought together to create a system. So I think that moving forward, this might be the answer to some of the questions. I know the example given was for a vent. There are many different instances where different products are brought together. But if you were, for example, trying to give some kind of warranty or assurance that a door is fireproof sitting in a wall, you could get that door and the wall built into a system and get it tested and approved. Then it becomes a robust accredited detail. And I think that maybe that's the way that the industry will move, because that system is already in place with LABC. Just that at the moment they focus quite a lot on sort of thermal bridging and things like that. But there's no reason to say that that can't be used for other junctions in the building.
So the process is there. It's just got to be implemented.
Yeah, it is there, and if you use a robust detail LABC approved, you don't actually need to have building regulations because it's already been approved. Like I say, you'd have to build the thing that you need, the whole system, and get it tested so that it becomes certified as a robust detail. But seeing as the industry is becoming a bit more, robust, and there's a regime in place now, maybe LABC will start to test more common junctions. But you'll always get new junctions using different products as they come on the market. But quite often we're using the same type of products in the same situations.
Yeah, and I think there should be more standardization of that type. That seems to make sense to me.
Right, I haven't got a name. I've got initials, SCD.
Oh, that's probably me, Colin White. SCD.
Hello,
Why are you SCD?
Smoke control dampers, but since the last meeting, Microsoft have changed it. I've now got a new Teams app on my computer, so I've just been trying to set it up. But now that's what you call a live management.
A live situation.
Yeah. I think Paul's already asked a question. The initial question related to ventilators, and the mention of a grain store suggests that it's industrial ventilation and process handling. Paul's right when it comes to CE marked or UK CA marked smoke exhaust ventilators, NSHEVs. They would be they wouldn't have bird mesh on them necessarily. They wouldn't have insect mesh on them. And he's right that they, in theory, they only operate in an emergency. But that the question's quite valid actually, because you often see, particularly in shopping centres and commercial buildings with atria, where the building owners start hanging down advertising boards or acoustic pods underneath the ventilators, and I would suggest that has more impact on the efficiency of the vents. A lot of people don't understand or realise the difference between geometric area and aerodynamic area. For example, you could have, if I take the doorway in my office, it's if I take the door off the hinges and I'm just left with the frame, I've got a clear opening of 2 meters by 1 meter, for example. That is defined as the geometric area. If I stick the door leaf back on, and the door is 15 degrees open, the geometric area of that doorway is still 2 meters. If I open the door 60 degrees, it is still 2 square meters geometric. An aerodynamic area can only really be derived from test, and it works out the resistance that the door, dependent on what position it's in, creates to the airflow through it. So, you know, there's a lot of confusion everywhere, even within the industry, about 3 areas: geometric areas, aerodynamic areas, and then all the other stuff. If you go to smoke control dampers, for example, whilst there's no, and Paul White, please jump in if I'm wrong here, but there's no specific aerodynamic test for smoke control dampers. But for example, if you have a decorative grille that's going to go in front of the damper, if it's within 200 millimeters of the damper, it actually has to be tested with the damper. But there's nothing in the test that give you any airflow through it. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, in terms actually, the putting the grill within 200 millimeters is actually to do with insulation.
Yeah.
But the actual point about if you put a grill in front of a damper with a nominal 1.5 square meters free area, that's the damper. But you have to take into consideration, as the first speaker said, if you put perf in front of it and it's 50% perf, then it's 50% of the free area is gone. And so there's all sorts of implications with regard to that. Natural, it probably won't work, and a mechanical, you've increased your resistance.
Alan.
Hi, apologies if you can hear somebody drilling in the background. I'll make it brief. I don't think that a regulator will be able to prevent companies from using uncertified products. I mean, coming back to fire doors, which is what I know about, for years that I think the construction industry has, through ignorance or for cynical reasons, has bamboozled building control. You can buy a fully certified door set, but the majority of building projects over the years have brought in a certified fire door leaf, and then they've used or they've sourced door frames or the wood to make door frames from other sources, and they've brought in various ironmongery, and in theory they can create a fully certified door assembly. But in practice, I think, as you said this morning, Richard, even in sort of this year, it's been proved that 70% of fire doors are not being installed in a fully fire compliant state. I don't really think the regulator wants to take on that role. I don't think they've got the level of expertise to be experts at every product. I think they're looking for people to say, this is fully certified, but the devil's in the detail, and some people will claim that everything's fully certified, and then you'll find that people are buying door blanks and they're cutting apertures in it and fitting their own vision panels and all sorts of things. I think it would be the wrong approach to expect the regulator to pick up all those sorts of issues.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ron, come back on all that.
I just want to make a comment on the damper. As soon as we put the damper in front of a grill and we expect it to work in a natural environment, then we've created a natural ventilator, and then it needs to go through an aerodynamic test that doesn't involve forced ventilation. When we use the damper inside a duct system, the damper doesn't come with airflow rates because it's controlled with the velocity of the air moving through the cross-sectional area. As far as the regulator goes, the regulator is there to control. If the regulator doesn't set up a controlling certificate to validate the tests, the person purchasing the equipment doesn't know if it's tested or not to what it's tested. Okay, just like if we put a tire on a car, the tire is tested to the speed, to a specific speed. So you can't put a lower grade tire on a Mercedes that can do 180 kilometers an hour because it's unsafe. And the regulator needs to have a standard set of certificates that have the correct information on it, and people selling the products need to comply with those minimum information criteria.
I do agree with you, Ron, but in practice, that isn't what the regulator in the UK is doing.
Yes, nowhere where I've been does the regulator put out enough control to prevent ambiguity. And as long as we've got ambiguity, strange things happen.
Agreed.
Just to briefly come back on that.
Sorry.
The issue is that we're now generally speaking talking about flow design. We're not necessarily talking about fire safety. And if the flow design doesn't work, that's not necessarily critical. However, if the fire safety doesn't work, then it is. At the moment, if it's a damper, free area seems to be okay. If it's a vent to outside because you've got a sudden expansion, then you use aerodynamic. Aerodynamic free areas. But at the moment, as Colin said earlier, there's no requirement to measure aerodynamic free area on dampers. I'm not saying it can't be done because I know it can, but there's no standard that requires you to provide it.
Cliff.
Hi, I just reread the question and wondered if it could be clarified a little bit, because it says a regulator should prevent companies. Does that mean a control body, and are the companies the manufacturers of the products? Is this question about, because Ron gave the example of different products being brought together to create a system and nobody's tested the entire system? Is that what that question is driving at, that the regulator should prevent that from happening, or is it for each product? So it says a regulator should prevent companies from using uncertified products by providing clear guidance on compatible options.
I think probably the companies would be the contractor or the client. That's my reading of it.
Yeah, so I don't think a control body would be giving clear guidance on compatible options. But yeah, okay. So I was just a little bit thinking about what Ron was saying about the ventilation system, and just thinking that are we still answering this question, and then does the question need to be clarified a little bit?
Well, the purpose of
feel
this,
free anybody to suggest changes to the question. They're certainly not set in stone at all.
the answers.
The answers, sorry, I always call them the questions for some reason, but they're the answers. They're the answers, but they're the questions for you.
Yeah. So the purpose of this really, Cliff, is we've got probably 20 or so different responses from people that are have got a lot of knowledge in this area. What we want to try and do is filter that back to probably 3 or 4, so we've got something to actually fight with, because there's a degree of replication in these as well.
Very much. Yeah.
Richard, just before we move on to the next question,
I was going to say, do you want to? This would be a good point actually for you to do your
yeah. So
Paul McSorley piece. It comes nicely actually from that question in a way, doesn't it?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does. So Paul McSorley, who's one of our BIM for Housing colleagues, is a technical director at Mace. Has a passion about the right products being selected. So I'm just going to show Paul's slides. I won't be able to deliver this in any way as well as Paul does. Unfortunately, I've got Paul White on the call as well, who knows a lot more about this than I do. In fact, he probably knows more about it than Paul McSorley does. So the point is that the point that Paul McSorley has explained to me is that all of that conversation that we've just had about whether the product's been tested as an assembly, for example, and you're buying a let's say a smoke damper in this particular example, what he's basically saying is that the right product, a product that's perfect in terms of compliance, can then be put in the wrong situation because of the wall it's going into, for example. So what he's done is tried to work through a process, a decision tree that shows how those decisions do need to be taken. Now, it's very complex, but it's complex because it is complex. And what we need to perhaps do is figure out some way of simplifying it. So if I just run through these, what Paul's saying is that really you start off with a specification that is descriptive, and that descriptive specification is great, but you then need to, before you go into detailed design, you then need to make it prescriptive, and you need to have a product that satisfies that requirement and then be able to manage it going forward. So what he's done here with great diligence is gone through and looked at a particular scenario of saying we want to select a fire damper, and just for selecting a fire damper and installing it, what he's saying is that all of these different steps that you can't read because there's too much detail in here actually have got to be considered at different stages, and whatever decision you take, it can then lead on to a selection of a solution. So in principle, if we can get this right, we could turn this into some sort of AI process, a decision tree anyway, that could follow through and then suggest the right alternatives. So what Paul's tried to do is simplify that very complex decision structure into saying, well, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? What purpose is that particular fire damper being selected for? And we initially need to identify what the safety risk is for that space, and then look at how that fire damper will fit into the system that is supposed to be delivering that particular safety. But then we start to look at what the classification of the product is, and then moving on from there, what wall it's going into, what substrate, etc., so that you're then making sure that you've got a tested product that's the right product for the right requirements, which may not be the right. It could be a good product, but not for the right requirements. And then you've then got the complexity of what wall it's going into, and then you've got the complexity of whether was it installed properly. So what we've been trying to do, or Paul's been trying to do, is to work this through a series of different steps that then allow us to understand what the sophistication of this process is, so that it can then be more easily tracked. And there's a range of different elements in this. Paul White, is there anything that that you could help me with this? Because I'm now getting into the weeds a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the what you've explained is exactly right. So you go through your space risk, you go through the building type, you determine what classification of damper you need, but then the next thing you have to know before you get too far is what type of wall it's going into, and then that gives you the type of product and the type of testing that you need. I think the point that Paul is also trying to make here is this: if you could go back to the previous slide.
Yep.
Is that this whole process is actually exactly the same for flues, pipes and trays, fire doors, the wall types themselves, in fact, bus bars, fire curtains, and ducting. So if you're going, you have to go through this process and pick out your wall at some point, because once you've determined your space risk and the property that you're in, then you can go on to select the actual product. And it's just to show people that it isn't easy at all. And even fire dampers, which I suppose some of it, those of us who understand them or whatever, seems relatively straightforward. As soon as we get on to the doors, as a for instance, if the doors are different shape, you might not be able to buy this door from this person. And this is the point, that certain people will have tested certain things, and you can't assume that everybody's tested every different type of wall, because it's not physically possible to do that.
Yeah,
but that's the area. That's the area where we fall down. Is that there's more and more doors every other week. Sorry, more and more walls and floors every other week, and you can't keep up with installing the products.
And it's an iterative process, isn't it? You've
Yes.
got, for example, as I understand it, it's not unusual that maybe for somebody to start off by saying this is going to be the internal wall structure, and they've designed it around maybe a British gypsum solution, and then for whatever reason it then gets swapped out for a Knauf solution, and
Yes.
that Knauf solution, when the fire dampers were selected, they were perhaps selected to go in a British gypsum solution.
Yeah.
And that type of iteration is something that we need to understand. And I suppose that's why the new legislation requires change control to be more robust.
Yes, I mean, I think that's exactly the point. So if you choose a product and the hole's the wrong size and you can't put it in that hole anymore, you've got to get the hole size changed, and then that becomes a warning or a major or whatever it is. Yes.
So if anybody's interested in drilling into this in any more detail, then put your name in the chat, because it's certainly something that we want to try and pick up in the early part of next year.
Yeah, so Paul is working on the idea. Perhaps is just, if you see at the top right of that side, it says passive code. That actually we work with a passive code first, then we get to then we start looking at the individual products that are going to go through it. Oh, sorry, yes, and then we look at the walls, the wall types. So we actually follow through a full design route, so that because that's the next thing. You might have a damper going through, and then some pipes and cables, and they shouldn't be in the same hole, which is the first thing. But then you might find that there isn't a test for the pipes and cables through this wall, but there is one for the dampers. And it is just such a circular process that you have to just keep analysing it and going backwards and forwards.
Yeah. So here, for example, these I've just so there you've got the workbook for a fire damper. You've then got the pipe work, and then you've got the duct work. And I think that process is now looking at smoke control. He and Paul White, I think.
Yes.
So if you want to join that, yeah, please sign up, and we'll pick it up in the new year.
Yeah, we've got some people already, so that's excellent. Great, Just can you put the question up again?
I think you'll be on that, won't you, Ron?
Yes, I'll put my name in. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Just so people are aware, Paul's doing a lot of this under something called the Passive Fire Study Group, which is I think it's study group, which is all the tier 1 contractors. So if there are contractors at whatever level, then you can find I think it's PKFG. You can find that through the internet, and they have their own website.
Cool.
Okay, so let's look at the answers again. This was very popular as with no, actually several people. Right, okay, so it's number 13. Just can you scroll down to number 13? Early engagement with manufacturers during the design phase, regular checking and inspection during construction, and commissioning and testing before handover are important steps for proper installation of fire safety products. I'm not sure anybody would actually disagree with that, are they?
I certainly wouldn't. I suppose the
No.
question is, how does a manufacturer get engaged in that way? I don't know. Have we got any manufacturers on?
You've got an importer. They wouldn't necessarily get involved in the case of smoke control dampers that I'm involved with, because primarily the damper is a component, and quite an important component, in a smoke and heat exhaust ventilation system, be it a naturally ventilated one or a mechanically ventilated one. And they tend to be those systems tend to be designed and specified by, designed and the components selected to suit the requirements of a fire strategy report. And I wouldn't necessarily be involved with the selection of our equipment into a specific system. I can't actually see how that would happen. All we can do, we can offer a DOP, and we can back that up with a classification report from on the testing that will let the specialist who we hope would be using our equipment to make the selection of the right product for his application. But I can't recall ever being involved in or engaged with the client on this.
Could I support Colin's statements, because he's exactly right, and the engagement usually comes later when it doesn't fit. But in fact, all the information is generally available in the public domain, and it's not engagement necessarily. It's competency and learning about this stuff, and not just assuming there's a solution to your problem. And there always has been, because people have hidden it, and now we're finding that people can't hide things for you. And it's actually, I don't know whether it's engagement with, but it's learning about the products, and listening and building your own knowledge, really. I'm going to say this one I just thought was a statement of fact to an extent. and it didn't appear in my top 3. So
Okay,
mine was more about competence, because
yeah,
you
I'm
should,
coming
if
on to
you're involved
competence.
in this, you should know this. That's the point.
Yeah, we're going to come on to competence, Paul. I've saved it
Yeah.
till the
No, I understand. It was just to support that point.
sure. Oh no,
That,
I understand. Of course, of course.
You should know this, because if you don't, you shouldn't be doing this job.
Yeah, really. Cliff, is your hand up from before, or is it a fresh?
I think go on to the next person,
Yeah,
Richard.
I think it was
Adam.
that was from before. Sorry.
Oh no, it's Adam Heath.
Oh yeah. So I guess we're slightly different in that we're doing cavity barriers and things, so not necessarily smoke and dampers and things like that. But I think we'd see a fair amount of early engagement in design phase for product specification to go on to detailed drawings and things. And then in terms of regular checking and inspection during construction, we have an app we provide to installers so that they can catalog the installation phase of the products, or they can call out our site services team and they can come and do a report as well. So I think we obviously supportive of kind of regular collection of information on installation progress and quality of install. It's pretty big from a golden thread perspective, and in terms of handing over documentation that proves that what you've done is compliant with the building regulations. I think fire stopping and things in that vein, showing you've met the functional requirements, you need to be able to prove that your compartmentation's in the right place with the right spec and installed to the right level of quality as well. So less so on the commissioning and testing of the installed things for us, because the only way you could do that would be to set the building on fire, which we're obviously trying to avoid. But I think the capturing that installation phase is key from a golden thread, but both for evidencing the competency or the eventual competency of the installer, but when you get to the handover stage, giving the end client confidence that what they've got is actually installed in terms of the project drawings and installed to the right level of quality.
Absolutely, thank you. Cheers. Alan Oliver.
Yes, thanks, Richard. I did have answer 13 as one of my top 3, but I did suggest that it should be changed to early engagement with manufacturers and installers during the design phase. If an installer is being nominated to do the work, and I'll give you a really good example of that. You can look at a fire tested detail and say whether the design is compliant or not. But from a practical point of view, if you're installing fire dampers in walls where the ductwork is very big, for example, you might want to be sealing around, fire stopping around the damper before all of the ductwork has been installed, simply because you might not be able to access it once the ductwork has been installed. The whole length has been installed. You might want to get to the actual damper when there's a chance to actually access it and fire stop above it. So I think what's coming out here is that a lot of manufacturers won't necessarily want to get involved, but the installers will want to, and they'll want to make sure it actually works from a practical point of view when they're called upon to do so.
John Field.
I think you must be on mute, John.
His hand's gone down.
Yeah, his hand's gone down. Right, Cliff, is this your hand still there?
No, it's up again.
Okay.
So I have to explain, I do have a frozen shoulder. I tend to agree with what Alan's just said. We've had this before in the design office where things go to site and the contractors say, why don't you guys get us in earlier in the design process? And the answer is because we hadn't selected the contractor at that stage. We didn't know who was going to be building it. But the answer to that is you could get a consultant in. You could get a contractor in a key meeting early on in the design stage. Just pay them their hourly rate and say, what do you think of this building we're trying to do? What are your suggestions? They're highly likely to attend these meetings because then they kind of got their foot in the door, haven't they? So that was the answer, and that actually worked very well. And you could do the same with the installers, obviously. So there is a way around it.
On a session we had last week, Cliff, we had Waits on, and Waits was saying that's exactly, Paula from Waits, she said that's exactly what they're doing. They're actually bringing the contractors in and also selecting products much earlier. So we're seeing a significant contractor there changing the way that they're procuring, which is really encouraging.
Well,
I'm pretty sure
not just changing the way, but proving that it actually works.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that the REBA plan of works, the latest one does actually call for a more collaborative way of working, and it does suggest that as one of the checklist items is to have the proposal reviewed by the contractor at least. Cool. Yeah, starting to happen.
Okay,
John,
move on, Richard.
John's here now.
So I try again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
You can, right? Okay, my apologies. Not sure what happened.
No worries.
But these things where it says manufacturer, it could be prefabricated, could be bespoke. It's obviously important that manufacturers stay on top of what's going on out in the outside world. So it's always handy to feed back to manufacturers what it is that the industry wants. So to me, that's what the design phase element is. Regular check-in, obviously before, during, after photos inspections is key. Too many times I would go and witness test an element. It could be a dry riser, it could be a fire alarm, but what the actual contractor is doing is he's actually commissioning it at the same time, and when it fails, that's just a failed bit of time. So these things need to be taken in a sequence properly to make sure that there is a robust process and each element is taken seriously, which is why I voted for this one. Yeah.
Okay, great. Cliff, is your hand still up, or is this a new one?
No, I'll take it down. Sorry.
Cheers. Okay, I want to just do, before we go on to competence, I just want to run through quickly a couple that are a little off. Right, question 24. Insurers can play a significant role in driving fire safety standards.
You scroll down, Jess.
Scroll down to 24, Jess. Insurers can play a significant role in driving fire safety standards. George.
Well, clearly that's obvious. I say it's obvious. It's one of the things I think that we need to more widely recognise, that it's not the threat of the regulator that should be driving a lot of this. It's that for organisations, either client organisations or contractors, if you can't evidence what you've done, then you're probably not insured, which is really significant. And certainly, I think I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they were saying that they believe that something like 80% of the projects are actually breaching their if there were a claim, they wouldn't be able to claim.
Wow. Paul.
Yeah, I have a slightly more cynical view of this. I think that there's been insurance guidance around ever since I can remember, and nobody ever actually does the additional stuff that they want. And I'm afraid that, like everybody else, for insurance, people go out for 3 quotes, and they probably take the cheapest one. So it depends on whether the insurer wants to win the business for that building or not. I think if they're hiding behind the fact that, if it's a new job, I think they should probably have a role in actually checking that things are up to standard, rather than only ensuring on on something that they balance the risk on one thing when they probably ought to know full well that it's a bigger risk. So is that fair to actually be insuring something that you haven't checked?
Well, I'm sure insurers do that all the time, because what they'll do is they'll put into their terms and conditions that you have to be open and honest and all that sort of stuff. And therefore, if you're not providing them with some information about a potential risk, then when you go and claim on that, they are in a position to be able to refuse it. I mean, I was talking to a company last week who was saying that they'd taken over another scheme where it was a fire engineering company, and they were installing sensors and things like that. So they took over something that somebody else had already installed all the sensors in, and they took it over on the basis of making it work, and they discovered that the sensors themselves weren't working. And so they went back to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer said, "You didn't buy them from us, so therefore you've got no warranty."
Yeah.
And they ended up getting in the middle of a situation where they had a £750,000 claim on them. That, and when they tried to get cover under their insurance, they were left high and dry. So they recognise the criticality of that, and they've taken it very much from an insurance perspective. And I've now had that conversation with several different organisations, and insurance, I think, could be a major driver in terms of getting this right. I think it complements what the threat of the legal action from the regulator, which I think most people think is unlikely is going to happen, but insurability, I think, is going to be likely. And if you're the CEO of a large construction company, or you're on the board of a housing association, you've got some responsibilities there to make sure that the processes that are in place are actually reflecting what's needed, in my view.
John, is that your hand
Yeah,
up again?
no. So I agree with that, George. I think it's more the fact that I think that the insurer should perhaps play a bigger part in helping people to comply with their insurance requirements.
Sure. Okay.
John.
Right, can you hear me again?
Yep.
Yeah.
Am I coming? Right, okay, maybe I'll fix the problem. So yeah, when I worked at Imperial College London, obviously multi-million-pound buildings, they took a massive part in ensuring that everything was as it should be. What we're talking about here is some insurers will put in their small print that certain things are required, but there's no perhaps insistence until they're making a claim. It's too late then. If you try and get your car insurance with no claims discount, they will insist in seeing that no claims before they allow you to progress with the insurance. Otherwise, they charge you more. I've only ever been asked to do a fire risk assessment by someone because their solicitor has advised they're trying to sell it, trying to rent it. You need to get fire risk assessment. I've never had someone come and say, my insurer's insisting that you get a fire risk assessment. So I think they could go a step further and insist in seeing certain documentation as part of that insurance, rather than wait for it to burn down, then say, well, we're not paying out. But it is related to cost, I think, and how much things are insured for.
That was exactly my point.
Okay. Anybody else got anything to say on that quickly? Ron.
So would it not be good if the insurers gave cost-saving incentives to the clients whose buildings had passed risk assessments, and where the products, if you incentivize, you see, the insurance guys are the biggest people we have because they control the money. They control who gets paid when the building burns down and who doesn't. So imagine if you had a sticker on your building saying when it was last serviced, then shoppers could decide to go in or not go in. I can go on about insurance for a while, but I best I keep quiet.
Yeah, so there's a separate thing that I can perhaps share at some stage if people are interested in this. There was something called the Housing Association Property Mutual that ran for about 20 odd years, because housing associations, when they were first established during the Thatcher period, they were uninsurable because they'd come out of local authority control, and the track record for building failures was so high that it was too big a risk for any insurance company to take on, because when they were part of the councils, they were self-insured. And what an organisation called the Building Performance Group and the Housing Association Property Mutual was set up to address that whole process. So there's a historic, very successful way of addressing this. It's just when it became when they actually managed to iron out all the problems, the risks dropped, and therefore the insurers came into the market, and therefore squeeze happen out. So, but it is something that if you're interested, anybody that's interested in the insurance thing, it might be something that we set a work stream up on, Richard, because I think it's really significant.
It's certainly pertinent, isn't it? And
Yeah.
timely. Because yeah, okay. Let's go on to competence now. We had a number of the answers we've got involve competence. Let me just competent individuals. Question 1, Jess. Competent individuals should be trained for their specific roles to ensure efficient planning and delivery of design work. Maintenance personnel should also be involved in the planning process to handle unforeseen events. That's question 1. Question 9, competence should be ensured across all roles in design, specification, installation, maintenance. Accurate and reliable product information is necessary for proper selection. There's another one somewhere. Competence, now this was put in by our competence specialist, Debbie. Competence is influenced by ethics and behaviours, requiring a cultural change in the industry. Right, who wants to have a go at one of those? Paul.
I think I've probably said enough today, haven't I?
No, I wanted you to just get it started off because you actually did put to comment on those.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the point, and we're at a stage where competence or knowledge or however you want to do it is so low outside of certain individuals that in terms of designing and selecting products, it's just not there. Fire dampers is pretty bad, but when we get into things like smoke control, which basically starts in the fire strategy, it's really concerning when the fire strategy for the entire building just says speak to somebody else. And and that basically and you know, and I'm also concerned with some of the designs that I see that they're maybe not quite as safe as they should be. So this is what I was saying, which is, you know, early engagement with manufacturers. You know, people have got to realise if you're dealing with the fire safety or the smoke control in a building, how can you design and specify it if you don't know how to check it and you don't know what you're doing with it? And you can't just keep relying on pushing it down the contractual chain. I mean, I came across something the other day where somebody told me that somehow or other the ductwork contractor was responsible for the smoke control. And I said, I mean, that's not actually legal because you know full well that they don't, that they have no competency in that area. How can you make them responsible for it? I think that's actually under contract. You can't actually ask somebody to do something they can't do. But the point is it goes on.
The semantic spin there is they say, oh, it's within the ductwork package.
Yes. So then they have to then go but it's too late because it's in the fire strategy and it should be in the building specification. So this is what I'm saying, that there's levels of competence in certain areas that they just aren't there.
Okay, let's bring in a few new people. Katerina, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi there. So when for you, competence, tell me.
What do you mean
where does it affect you directly?
Well, for me, because I work in servicing and maintenance, so I deal with a lot of contractors. And as you're saying, in terms of installing stuff and having that competency, we do sometimes struggle.
So how do you judge it? By certification or experience? I mean, how do you make the call?
Well, for me, the call's already made, but obviously through procurement standards. So we procure our contractors, and then that's then followed through, and then so they go to site and they do the work from that. I mean, we do make sure that they're certified through our procurement process. So it's done that way, really. So it's done at the beginning stages of the procurement. We make sure that they're certified to say whichever fire safety products that they're qualified in. So we manage it that way.
I think part of the issue there, it's interesting Katharina has just said that, because what you're dealing with, Katharina, is an organisation that's actually carrying out the work. So you're almost one step away from the person that's actually doing the work. And in fact, you could be 2 steps away, because it might be that your maintenance contract is with an organisation that's maybe doing all the M&E, and then they let the electrical work to a third party, and then then you've got that work has been carried out by an individual electrician. So I don't think we've got adequately that track through of expertise, but
Yeah, that's true what you're saying. Yeah, we do have a lot of third parties depending on specialist equipment, because we do have a lot of ALVs and also dry risers, so they are through third party contractors.
Do you have your own workforce?
What do you mean, internal?
Yes. Do you have your own people on the tools, or do you outsource it all?
We have to outsource it.
Yeah.
We haven't got the competency within the business.
No, that's not unusual, I don't think.
Jamie.
Sorry.
I just wanted to back up echo that as well, because I come from a small / medium-sized housing association, and we don't, because there's only 7 of us in the entire property team responsible for day-to-day repairs and planned maintenance and property safety. We are quite reliant on contractors and outside agencies a lot, and while we do our best, we are quite reliant on what they tell us.
Sure. Yeah.
So therefore, you need to make sure that you get the right digital evidence from them, Jamie. That's what I would really recommend, because that's critical.
Yeah.
Vic.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can.
Yeah, it went off then. Yeah, my concern with that as well is often you can actually make sure that you do have somebody that's competent, or at least, a company that's competent. They could be UCAS credited or whatever. It doesn't mean that the individuals going on site are competent to do that piece of work. But even if they are, and they go on site and they install something, what usually happens is a different trade will come later, and they'll need to install something in place of that or next to it, and they'll alter it. And what's been done then, you know, the product isn't right, even if the person was competent. So, you know, we can go as far as we can in trying to make sure people are competent, and there's nothing out there to say for what type of work they're doing, what competency looks like. So we need to make sure the person that's judging that is competent. And how do we make sure that is, you know, they're the right person as well? So it's it seems like a bit of an impossible situation, really.
Well, somebody might. There are people who would actually say, "Well, how do we check that the people who are framing the laws are actually competent?" But I wouldn't say that myself, obviously.
Yeah.
Paul White.
It's not the laws; it's the guidance. But anyway,
Yeah,
that's a different thing. This is the problem. Third-party certification doesn't necessarily mean that individuals are competent. It does mean that they've been trained at the moment, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they've been assessed. So I cannot give you a certificate to say that I'm competent in anything I've spoken to you about today. So I hold my hand up to that. But I think I've got plenty of experience, and I do a lot of research, and I do a lot of CPD, like doing things like this. And this is the problem. You can't necessarily rely on the third-party certificated company yet. And if we're looking at smoke control at the moment, there are no qualifications for smoke control installers. So a lot of them will be Sparkies because they have to run a lot of cable and join a lot of things together. But they're not they couldn't demonstrate competency in installing a vent or a fire damper or some ductwork or anything like that. So we're still in the chicken and egg situation. And the other point is because I'm looking at this from other points of view, in terms of looking at training and assessing people, I've got to do a trainer course, and I've got to do a 5-day assessor course, and somebody then comes assess me to see if I'm capable of being an assessor. So it's not even just the hoops of the people. There aren't enough assessors out there. There's loads and loads of training, but as I always say, if I could stick, I don't know which particular animal I should pick or not, but I could stick a load of animals and a load of people and train them for 8 hours. They're all trained, but if I let the animals out on site, could they fit a smoke control system? And the answer is no. Could the people who've been trained go out and do it? The answer is possibly, but somebody needs to go and see them do it. And this is the competency hoop that we're going through at the moment, and it's going round and round in circles, because certainly we're now looking at fire damper competency and fire resisting duct and duct competency, but we haven't even started on smoke control yet. And the first part is trying to find out how you get started on this ladder.
Colin.
Yeah, I agree with what Paul said there. Are we expecting Victoria to make a judgment on the actual person who's attending her sites to do this work, or should she be looking for an accredited contractor, for example? I know that Paul mentioned that there's no specific training for smoke vent systems, but there is an installer scheme that's not mandatory, but it's been recognised by the Smoke Control Association. And whilst it's not perfect, it is actually starting to check on-site checks of installs. It's more from the point of view of making sure that they got the right equipment there and the company have gone through their process. Now, if you use a company that have gone to the expense of obtaining this third-party installer certification, that's a starting point. They do send their people down. We have people down in the epicenter of the world, the West Country down here, and we have their installers come in for half a day, and we teach them as much as we can about the product, and we tell them what to look out for, what to do, what not to do. But that doesn't make them that doesn't, as Paul said, they're trained, they've given knowledge and information about a particular product, And that product, I'd say, is a component in a smoke vent system, and there are other components equally as important. So, you know, do you make somebody, how do you judge somebody being competent for the whole system? Paul mentioned they're targeting fire dampers, and then there's going to be fire resisting ducts and that. So to make a system, are you going to have all these 5 different competent experts in judging all parts of the components? I don't know. It's strange.
Will.
Hi there. So it's introduce myself. I'm from MTVH. They're sort of quite a pretty large housing provider, but we've yeah, in terms of, there's quite a lot of questions there, but in terms of the fire doors, I think we generally have a fire sort of technical requirements, which we specify. We say that the contractor needs to get their own third-party fire consultant to sort of and sign off the door sets and things like that, and then we do a benchmark on site, and we get our own fire consultant to check that and look at the door as a benchmark, and then it goes on from that process. But I didn't want to talk about that. I was actually talking about competency. So this is quite big at the moment. So we are obviously, with the new gateway changes, we can't start on site next year without gateway 2 submission. So the problem that we have at the moment is that we're tendering to contractors, and we need, as the client, we need to show the competency in order to submit gateway 2. So that's obviously comes down to PAS document, which is the new, and there's a document called a flex document. So we've created a set of questions that go through all the characteristics and tender. And I mean, it basically looks like it goes back to CDM, where you know, most contractors are doing it anyway. It's just that they need to prove it in a different way. And there's obviously a different building for high risk buildings. There's a different building control body to sign all of this off. So, but I had a question as well on this, but which is, so obviously one part of it is we've drafted a whole load of competency questions that I can't find anywhere, that I don't think anyone's done, about, you know, new tender process. But what is really baffling at the moment is when you're tendering on a design and build, do you appoint the design team yourself as the client through you know, a standard JCT? Do you do a PCSA to appoint the design team, or do you ask the contractor to do that? And with no one's, you know, different solicitors or whatever tell you different things. And a lot of that comes down to competency, because you need to assess the competency before you get into contract. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's got the answer to that, option 1 or option 2, to what's the best route to go down now that everything's shaken up. And but yeah, I'll leave it like that.
Vic, you got the answer to that?
I wouldn't say I've got the answer to it. It's just an observation on my part that I feel since, you know, in the last couple of years, looking at building safety, is the go-to is design and build contract. It always seems to be design and build contract. To me now, I'm not sure that's the right contract to look at on the new products, and often I think it's because of perhaps cutting corners, or, you know, doing VE exercises on products, and I think we probably need to be more specific, and especially with regards to maintenance going forward. And this was sort of briefly touched on before. Perhaps we should have maintenance people in at the beginning as well, to have a look at what product we're going to need and how we're going to use it in the end. And that's part of the gateway process anyway. How's it going to be used? How's it going to be when it's occupied? How's it going to be used in a fire strategy situation? But part of that is also how we're going to maintain those products. So what should we be using? So the competency comes in making sure that, you know, we're not going to, when they get people on board, the manufacturers, the suppliers, the installers, and we look at the competencies, that's not changed. And I think a design and build contract sometimes maybe not the way to go, because it gets changed too often.
Thank you. That's actually one of our people's one of the answers I read out actually stresses having the maintenance people in at the get-go, right at the beginning. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid I keep looking at this, that you know, it's well known that if you start out on a design process, you spend a lot of money at the start and then it dwindles away. But the point is if you then change your mind part way along, then your costs go up again, and you end up, instead of having a nice depleting curve, it goes up and up and up. And of course, the other point that goes with that is that the project gets out further. So there's some thought that says, well, do the design first and then just get the contractor to build it, because there shouldn't be any issues. And if there are issues, they should be small ones because the design is complete. The issue we've got as an industry is that nobody wants the design responsibility. So and they think that solutions are always going to be there and they're going to be simple. The only reason they think that is because people have been hiding them for years and hiding the problems. And so if you look at it from the point of view of cost benefit, if you like, get somebody to design it and then get somebody to build what the design is, which is pretty, because with a building, it's not like building a product where you build a load of prototypes. You have one go at this. So there's no point in having loads and loads of areas within the building that are essentially prototypes, because you're having to solve the problem on the job. So in terms of that, but I mean, the issue is will you get somebody to actually take the design on board for you? Because it's not happening at the moment, because one of the questions I keep asking is who has design responsibility? And then suddenly it's down to the contractor. I said, well, then you've got to question all the information you've been given to date. You're now responsible. So you've got to start the design again. And it should have been done with the fire strategy and the specification and the consultant. But it isn't. So and I've actually sat in meetings. Well, you've got a design responsibility now. You do what you want, and it's like, oh.
I want to bring in Liam. Liam, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Hi all.
Hi there. Good to see you.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No. I want you to talk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So competence from our side, I suppose it goes hand in hand with compliance as well. So Orbit being a housing association, we look at it from the operation and maintenance side. So fire being one of the largest kind of risks to a building so far. I suppose the question we go, the view we look at it from is the holistic idea of competence around work that's happening on a building. So you can have a contractor in, for instance, that's kind of making penetrations in a wall, a plumber, a sparky, anyone like that. They may be competent in the job they're doing. They may not be competent in making compartmentation. Correct, and that's where kind of the difference lies. So the way we're looking at it is that we're getting the exact people on site that we can with the correct, so we'll have validation of not just the company but the individuals. So we'll have their qualifications, what they're competent in, and also evidence, digital evidence of what they're sending as the evidence of the work that they've done. So it's not showing the work they've done, but also the kind of making sure that nothing else within that area is being affected. But yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. I know it's kind of a whistle top tour to it, but yeah, competence is it from our perspective, it's controlling the employment and the maintenance of the contractors rather than just the work that they're doing on site.
Sure. Yeah. George.
Yeah, I was just going to say hello, Will. I've not seen you for a long time.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. So what you've raised, I think, is a really interesting one. In that, I think everybody's going to be all the landlords are going to be looking at that at the moment because it's so fundamental. Now, what we do have, as Richard mentioned earlier, we've got a very expert person, Debbie Carlton, who's an expert in competency. We've also got people like David Jones, who's from the ICM and the Institute of Construction Management, and they've been doing a lot of work on competency as well. So what I'm thinking, Richard, is that it might be useful to draw together maybe another session, which Will you can join, and definitely. You know, it might be, you know, I imagine, you know, that those drafted competency questions, would it be maybe, you know, how confidential are those? Are they things that you might be willing to share with, for example, Liam from Orbit, you know, to so that we actually can end up with something that has been, because it'd be great if contractors were being asked the same questions, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, the competency questions they're all out there on the PAS, whatever it is, the new 9.8, the contractor competency, and then there's the flex document. So it's all, but we've just like sort of tried to digest it all into tender questions that make it really clear and simple into 4 different characteristics of what we're looking for in competency. So yeah, certainly I think all different HAs and groups should have a consistent mindset on. I mean, definitely it's I mean, a lot of it is there's so many wider questions that I think a different meeting would help, because you know, there's all golden thread obviously is the big one, and retaining the CDE, and you know, it's massive. That's key to it all.
Are there any other landlords or housing associations or councils on the group that might be interested in that? If you are, put your name in the chat and just put competency, and we can pick up on that.
Yeah, we'll set that up for maybe like end of January, beginning of February or something.
Yeah.
Okay, we haven't heard from Jarek. Jarek, are you there?
Which is amazing.
Yeah, it's disturbing.
Jarek the legend.
He's here. He's live.
I'm here. Sorry, I was just listening. I joined you on the bus going back in, so, and then I transitioned into here. So I'm just listening.
Okay.
Yeah, when someone mentioned cables, I was twitching, but apart of that, I don't really I don't think I have much more value to add to this conversation.
No, sure.
Sorry.
No worries. We just wanted to see you. Really.
Good to see you.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Has anybody got anything they particularly want to say on the competence, or anything else we've discussed, or anything out from left field that has nothing to do with anything we've been talking about? Come on.
Well, let's finish early, Richard.
Let's finish early. That's my favourite word. Alan, you weren't supposed to do that. Alan.
Sorry about that. I'll just unmute myself. No, it's just sort of to take the opportunity to give the BIM for Housing reference document a plug. If there's nothing else, because obviously competency and getting installations and design right first time. The BIM for Housing reference document on fire doors, it covers all that, and obviously it's just focused on fire doors. But I am aware that there's a number of people in this group today who haven't been involved in creating this reference document. So for those who don't know anything about this, over the last 12 months, the BIM for Housing has had a working group that's created a reference document on how to inspect new doors, existing doors, and how to manage and maintain them. And for anyone who doesn't know this, we're just about to have it signed off, and I'm aware that there will be a number of people here who I think would like to have the opportunity to read it and pass comments on it before we do get it signed off. So with your permission, I will. We've got a new draft that's going to be ready, I think, on Monday, and I'll send it across to Richard and George, and then if it can be forwarded on, we're looking to have it signed off and issued by the end of this month for issue in January. So the timing's brilliant. If people could care to read it over Christmas or early January, and then pass comments through to me.
Yeah, put your name in the chat and say fire doors, and we'll know.
Super.
Do that, and we'll get it over to you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So, this is our last meeting of the year. So, have a good Christmas and New Year's and all that jazz. And we'll see you late January, mid-January, into February. And George, anything?
No, I think that's great. Thank you very much, everybody, for their contribution this year. We've had some fantastic input from subject matter experts, and to be frank, it's just growing and growing. I mean,
well, we had 300 active members last year, and we've got 1,000 more than 1,000 now. So yeah. That's you guys.
Yeah. So Alan's also started work on smoke. On other major elements, dampers and things like that. So that's something that's going to kick off in the new year, which Paul and Ron would be interested in, perhaps, and Colin. Good. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody. Cheers.
Happy New Year and good Christmas.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Have a good Christmas.